Hi kids, happy Easter! Pastor Josh here again with the greatest story ever, the story of the first Easter. Now today's story takes place just where the last story took off, outside of Jerusalem in a place known as the Garden of Gethsemane, a place where Jesus could go and pray, and he needed to pray. Jesus knew what was coming. He knew what he had to do to save us, but that didn't mean it was going to be easy. In fact, this is going to be the hardest thing that anyone ever had to do. He was a little scared. So he prayed to God. If there was another way, let's use that plan, he said. But if this is the only way, Lord, not my will, but yours. And God sent him a couple of angels to comfort him. Let him know, yes, this is the only way, but everything's going to be all right. And after Jesus prays, he meets back up with his disciples and finds they've all fallen asleep on him. He wakes them up and says, "Get up, guys. My betrayer comes." And that's when they see Judas leading a group of Roman soldiers to take Jesus. Now at first the disciples want to fight. They don't want Jesus taken away. But Jesus tells them, "Stop, guys. This is how things are supposed to be." And he lets himself be arrested. The disciples don't know what to make of this. Fact is, they see Jesus willingly let himself be taken away, and they're afraid. And they run away. Jesus is taken before the Sanhedrin, the Jewish religious court. They're trying to try him for blasphemy, crimes against God. No matter how hard they try, they can't get anything to stick. Jesus has led a blameless life, and even when they hire fake witnesses to testify against him, they can't get anything to hold, anything that could allow them to execute Jesus. Finally, Caiaphas, the high priest, comes up to him and says, "Are you really the Son of God, the Messiah?" And Jesus says, "I am." Now this is the truth. But the fact of the matter is that if the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the rest of the Sanhedrin decide to believe this, that means they have to give up their power and do what Jesus tells them to. And they're not willing to do that. So they charge Jesus with blasphemy and sentence him to die. But they don't have the authority to have him killed. And so they take Jesus to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of the area. He's the one that has to say you can kill him before they could execute Jesus. They make up this wild story about Jesus creating a rebellion amongst the people. Pilate sees right through it. He knows there's no reason under Roman law to have Jesus killed. But he also knows that if he doesn't do what the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and all the others want him to do, they're likely to cause trouble for him. And he's not in the best of positions with Rome as it is. So he decides to try to make the decision not his own. This is during the Passover still, and according to tradition, the Romans will release one prisoner of the people's choice during the Passover feast. So Pilate gives them a choice between two people, Jesus and a guy named Barabbas. Now Barabbas is the worst kind of scum. He's killed people, he's tried to lead people against Rome. He's someone that Pilate's sure the people are going to want to see die. And yet he can't believe his ears when instead of calling for the release of Jesus, stirred up by Jesus' enemies, the crowd starts to cry out, "Free Barabbas." Finally, Pilate says, "Fine. His blood's not on my hands. Do with him as you want." And so Jesus is led away to be executed, to be crucified. That's the worst way to kill someone that the Romans ever concocted. It's brutal. Before they even take Jesus to be executed, the soldiers beat him within an inch of his life and shove a crown of thorns down on his head. This isn't just sat on top, kids. It's shoved down. Even if he could have, Jesus wouldn't have been able to get it off his head. And then they force him to carry his own cross, which is several pounds, I might add, 2 very heavy timbers of wood, probably a good 2 blocks at least, to the place where they're going to execute him. But the fact of the matter is, it's too heavy for him. And he drops it. So the Romans grab a man from the crowd called Simon and order him to carry the cross for him. Finally, they go to Golgotha, the place where Jesus is going to be executed. And they nail him to the cross. Iron nails through his wrists and his ankles to make sure there's no way he can get off of the cross. And then they raise the cross, and the execution starts. The crowd mocks and jeers him. They make fun of him, saying stuff like, "He healed others, let him help himself." But after being on there for hours, Jesus calls out to God, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." These people are literally murdering him, and Jesus asks God to forgive them. Not too long after that, he cries out, "It is finished." And then he dies. After that, a friend of his known as Joseph of Arimathea goes and asks Pilate for permission to bury the body. When Pilate says yes, Joseph and a man named Nicodemus bury Jesus in a tomb that Joseph had purchased for himself. 2 guards are posted to make sure nobody steals the body. And then everyone assumes that's the end of the story. But it's not. On the Sunday after he was crucified, an earthquake shakes the ground. And an angel comes, walks right by the guards, and rolls away the heavy stone that blocks the entrance to the tomb. The soldiers are so afraid they faint. And then shortly after, a group of women come to the tomb to put spices and oils on the body to make sure it doesn't stink. When they get there, they find the tomb is empty and an angel sitting on the stone. And he tells them, "If you're looking for Jesus, he's not here. He has risen. Now go and tell his disciples the good news." The women rush off. They can't believe what's going on, and guess who they run into on the way? Jesus himself. Jesus is alive. He died, but he came back. And that, kids, is why we celebrate Easter. It's got nothing to do with bunnies or eggs or chocolate. We celebrate because this is the day that Jesus came back from the dead after saving us from our sins. That's why we celebrate Easter. That is why we say Happy Easter every year. Because Christ saved us.